A very good evening and welcome to World Now at 4. I am Peace Ogenegbawe. First, let's talk the headlines. On the headlines, FG condemns attack on Edo train passengers. Senegal declares national mourning after bus crash. Still on the news, Biden visits U.S.-Mexico border in trip. And on sport, Australian Open players can compete with COVID-19. Now the news in detail. Nigeria's federal government has condemned strongly the kidnapping of passengers at Tom Ikimi train station, Igwebe, Edo State, southern Nigeria. The Ministry of Transportation, in a statement through its Director, Press and Public Relations, Henshaw Ogwibike, said the public is hereby reassured that the security agencies are making efforts to rescue the kidnapped train passengers. Meanwhile, a retired police officer, a nursing mother, and her baby, as well as 2 minors, have been rescued from among the 32 passengers abducted from Igweben train station in Igweben local government area of Edo State. Reacting to the incident at the scene where it happened in Igwebe, Deputy Governor of Edo State, Philip Shaibo, commended the effort of the security agencies on the issue.
What is key is that Edo will be too hot for anybody to attempt to do what they tried to do yesterday. We have a well thought out security architecture here, so cannot be a base for terrorists or kidnapper, whatever they call themselves. So we will not want to say too much now, but one thing is that we are relocated to this place, and by the grace of God, until we get resolved, we are not living here.
Meanwhile, the Nigerian Railway Corporation, that is NRC, has denied ordering shutdown of the train station in Edo State following the abduction of train passengers waiting to board a train at the weekend. The Independent National Electoral Commission, that is INEC, said youths constitute highest number of registered voters who would vote in February and March elections, with 48 million out of the entire 93.5 million eligible voters. The National Commissioner at INEC in charge of Information and Voter Education Committee, Festus Okoye, stated these during the Commission's engagement with identified groups on the role of youth ahead of 2023 general election. Okoye said from INEC's record, the youth held all the aces to determine the outcome of the 2023 elections. It said out of the total 9,518,756 valid newly registered voters between June 28 and June 31, 2022, those aged between 18 and 34 years of age were 7,286,871, representing 76.56%. He urged the youth to ensure that they cast their vote on election day, emphasizing that it is the only way, and when they do so, they would determine who would lead them. As the 2022 year came to an end, no less than 189 deaths from Lassa fever were recorded out of 1,067 confirmed cases in 112 local government areas in 27 states of the Federation. The Lassa fever situation report for Epi Week 52, that is from December 26, 2022 to January 1, 2023, released by the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, showed that there were 8,202 suspected cases, even as 63 healthcare workers were among the victims. The report also noted that the number of reported deaths with a case fatality rate, CFR, of 17.7%, was lower than the CFR of the same period in 2021, which was 20%. According to NCDC, the number of suspected cases increased compared to that reported for the same period in 2021. In other words, Nigeria recorded more suspected Lassa fever cases towards the end of 2022 compared to the same period in 2021. The agency pointed out that of the 72% of confirmed cases, Ondo State reported 33%, Edo 25%, and Bauchi 14%. It said that the predominant age affected is 21 to 30 years, while the male-to-female ratio for confirmed cases is 1 to 0.8. Governor Mai Buni of Yobe State has declared today and Tuesday public holidays to welcome Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari to the state. This was contained in a statement by the state head of service, Garba Bilal, in Damaturu on Sunday. Buhari will be visiting the state to inaugurate projects including cargo airport, ultra-modern market, and maternal and child health care complex. He, however, said civil servants are to resume work on Wednesday. This is World Now at 4. When the news returns, news from other parts of Africa. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Senegal's President Macky Sall, in a statement, said 38 people have died and 80 were wounded in central Senegal after two buses collided on Sunday. Newsmen gathered that the crash, which is one of the deadliest in the West African country's recent memory, was on one of the main east-west arteries near the town of Kaffrine, about 22 kilometers, which is 137 miles southeast of the capital, Dakar. Road accidents are common in Senegal, where large trucks and buses, often most of the time decades old, are overburdened and listed with hurtled down two-lanes highway, pitted and rotted by overuse. The South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, says his ruling African National Congress, which is the ANC, was determined to fight against crime and corruption after a series of graft scandals have damaged the party's popularity. Ramaphosa was speaking in Bloemfontein at celebration to mark the ANC's 111th anniversary.
We will continue to heed your messages, which you have articulated very clearly about the government, our movement taking steps to rid corruption out of South African life.
Ramaphosa was elected ANC leader again in December. Also said that ending blackouts and solving the energy crisis is one of the party's top priorities, which he has considered that load shedding was harming the country's economic growth. Let's now move to news from other parts of the world after this time out. To stay with us. Welcome back. United States of America's President Joe Biden has walked along the United States-Mexico border in Texas to see up close one of his presidency's biggest issues. He visited a migrant center in El Paso and joined Border Patrol agents in touring the section of the border wall. The number of migrants crossing has spiraled in recent months, making the Democratic president vulnerable to the accusation that he is soft on security. Last week, he announced tougher measures to expand the nationalities of those who can be sent back to Mexico. That left the Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, unimpressed. He said the president was failing to enforce immigration laws.
Appearance. Poet is making.
Start by telling him that he's 2 years and about $20 billion too late.
Abbott added the conversation was.
The governor's party said it intends to use its newly acquired control of the House of Representatives to investigate the Biden administration's handing of immigration. Biden's visit, his first since becoming president 2 years ago, was also expected to include meetings with border officials to discuss immigration and the increased trafficking of fentanyl and other opioids. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has vowed to punish supporters of the country's ex-leader Jair Bolsonaro after they stormed Congress. Supporters of the ousted far-right leader also stormed the Supreme Court and surrounded the presidential palace. Police regained control of the buildings in the capital Brasilia on Sunday evening after hours of clashes. Brasilia's civil police said 300 people have been arrested and officials have vowed to track down others involved. The Justice Minister Flavio Dino has said the government is seeking information on terrorist attacks. Heavily armed officers in the city gathered outside a camp of Bolsonaro supporters, one of a number that have been set up outside army barracks around the country since October's election today. Meanwhile, Brasilia's governor, Ibanez Rocha, has been removed from his post for 90 days by the Supreme Court. Pro-democracy rallies are being called by leftist leaders and groups across Brazil. From Iran, dozens of people demonstrated outside the prison in Iran's overnight amid reports authorities were preparing to execute another 2 anti-government protesters. Opposition activists posted videos showing people chanting slogans in front of Rajai Shah jail in the city of Karaj. The mother of Mohammed Gobadlo, one of the 2 men at risk of execution, appealed for clemency at the gathering. 2 protesters were hung on Saturday, prompting international condemnation. The United Nations Human Rights Office deplored the shocking executions of Mohammed Mahdi Karami alongside Mohammed Hosseini, which it said followed unfair trials based on false confessions. Let's now move to business news after this timeout. Do stay with us. Welcome to Business News on World Now at 4. Central Bank of Nigeria's policy on restriction on daily cash withdrawal takes off across the country today, January 9, 2023. Report states that in this arrangement, the maximum weekly limit for cash withdrawals across all channels by individuals and corporate organizations remains 500,000 naira and 5 million naira respectively. Individuals or organizations that have a compelling need to withdraw above the approved limits to transact legitimate businesses will have to pay a processing fee of 3% or 5% respectively. It was also reported that the CBN ordered deposit money banks not to pay customers making over-the-counter withdrawals the new Naira notes again. Instead, the Apex Bank directed the banks to load their automated teller machines, that is the ATMs, with only new notes to ensure that currency circulates across the nation ahead of 2023 January 31 deadline. Tenants in properties owned by private landlords have faced the highest rise in rent since comparable records began 7 years ago. This data, official data, shows that rents rose by 4% last year as landlords who face their own squeeze their higher mortgage rates passed on this cost. The British Office of the National Statistics said quarter of tenants surveyed in December said their rent had risen in the past 6 months. Renters proportionally spend more on housing costs than owners do. On average, they pay 24% of their weekly expenditure on housing compared to 16% by those with a mortgage. A growing proportion of people said they were finding it difficult to afford their rent or mortgage payment, rising from 27% in late September to 31% in mid-December. Meanwhile, a higher proportion, which is about 45% of adults with mortgage reported being worried about the changes in mortgage interest rates. It's time to join Richard Badung on Sport News. Stay with us.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Sport News and World Now at 4. I am Richard Badum. Newly promoted NPFL side Bendel Insurance has made a bold statement on their return to the Nigerian Professional Football League with the stunning 2-0 win at Aqua United in a 2022-2023 season opener at the Nest of Champions in Uyo. After a KJ start to the game, Imade Osarenko put the Benin Arsenal ahead in the 40th minute before Divine Nwachukwu doubled the lead 4 minutes later to give the visitors a 2-0 lead at halftime. The hosts dictated the pace of the second 45 minutes in search of a way back into the game in front of their apprehensive fans, but Insurance held on to record a famous victory on their return to the top flight. Bendel Insurance coach Mwande Ojije believes his team took their chances despite the sustained pressure from the host. On the other side, Aqua United coach Deji Ayeni, however, reviewed the errors of his players. And away from there, players at the Australian Open will not need to take COVID-19 test and could play it if they have the virus. Last year, players had to test daily and isolate if positive and also had to be vaccinated, while in 2021, the event took place in a biosecure bubble. Nine-time champion Novak Djokovic, who is unvaccinated, was deported last January, just before the tournament, because of his COVID-19 status. Last week, cricketer Matt Renshaw continued to play for Australia in a 5-day test match against South Africa in Sydney after testing positive for COVID-19. The Australian Open is set to begin on Monday, 16 January, and will run till Sunday, 29 January. And away from tennis now to football, where Graham Potter has retained the support of Chelsea's board despite Sunday's 4-0 FA Cup defeat by Manchester City. The former Brighton boss has been under pressure after a run of 6 losses in 9 games in all competitions, with Chelsea exiting both domestic cups and slipping to 10th position in the Premier League. The Chelsea boss has also said Chelsea needs to do better.
Make excuses and look for reasons, or you can say it isn't good enough, and both of those answers are correct. So we have to keep improving, stick together, because clearly we're suffering as a football club and it's not nice at all. But that's the way we're at the moment. That's where we are at the moment. We can't do anything apart from do our jobs better and work harder. And you understand, like I said, the supporters' frustration. That's understandable, and we respect that. But our job is to do our job and to keep working, see the situation for what it is. Of course, there's always other opinions and there's always negativity and criticism because the results haven't been positive, and haven't been positive. And of course, there's always other opinions and there's always negativity.
As the game was ongoing on Sunday, fans sang the name of former boss Thomas Tuchel, who was sacked in September during Sunday's game. Chelsea Porter will replace Tuchel as a long-term appointment. The Blues will travel to West London rivals Fulham, who are above them in the table, on Thursday before hosting Crystal Palace on Sunday. After facing Liverpool at Anfield in the Premier League, they then host Fulham and play strugglers West Ham. The Blues are currently without injured players Reece James, Ben Chilwell, Wesley Fofana, N'Golo Kante, Raheem Sterling and Christian Pulisic, among others. Still talking football, former Belgium and Everton manager Roberto Martinez has been appointed Portugal head coach. The Spaniard, who is 49 years of age, replaces Fernando Santos, who resigned after Portugal's quarter-final defeat by Morocco at the World Cup last month. Martinez stood down as Belgium coach after 6 years in charge following their group stage exit in Qatar. Martinez spent 4 years as Wigan manager, which included winning the 2013 FA Cup, before a 3-year spell at Everton in which they finished 5th once and 11th twice in the Premier League. Appointed Belgium coach in 2016, he led them to the top of the FIFA rankings in 2018 and they came third at the World Cup in Russia. Portugal won the 2016 European Championship and the 2018-2019 UEFA Nations League during Fernando Santos' 8 years in charge of the national team. And that's your sport news on World Now at 4. Back to Peace Ogenegbawe for the rest of the news. I am Richard Badum.
Thank you, Richard Badum, for the sports stories. And that's World Now at 4. But before we go, here are the headlines again. We told you that the federal government has condemned attack on Edo train passengers. Senegal has declared national mourning after a bus crash in the country. Biden has visited U.S.-Mexico border in a trip. And on sport, Australian Open players can compete with COVID-19. Remember to visit us on Facebook at Hills TV Abuja, Instagram at Hills TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Hills TV. I am Peace Ogenekbawe.